Hi, I'm Jill from KiteCo and I'm back with another pattern. This is Georgie. Now Georgie might look similar to Jazz, but she is quite different. We have included a couple of different options for the zipper overlay with the rolled handles, or the instructions to just simply make her with a crossbody strap without all the extra bits and pieces if you prefer it clean and simple. My thinking about this pattern was I wanted you to use it as a base for your creativity. I have included options for applique work. There is stars and there is hearts. Don't you think these are going to sell so well at our end of year markets with all this extra bits on them? Dress it up with an interesting strap, a chain strap, or just make a normal standard crossbody strap. So I'm going to get into the tutorial for this today, and it is a very to the point, precise how-to tutorial. So if this is the first time to our channel, please do consider subscribing and hitting the thumbs up if you like what you see. So let's get on with this tutorial. Now, I did make a huge error on this. See if you pick it up before I do and drop it in the comments. Let's get on and sew this now. So this is everything we're going to be needing to make our Georgie. So I am using a fabric I have sublimated. So as you can see, it doesn't quite go the length of the zipper panel, so that is my seam allowance, so excuse that. So we've got our pocket trim, our zipper panels. Now they have got the Deckerville light out of the seam allowance. Our two gussets, again, Deckerville light is out of all the seam allowances in this pattern, and our two lining. We've got our exterior body, again, Deckerville. Now I have used interfacing on mine because it's a fabric as opposed to a vinyl. You will also need some extra base support. Now I'm using Deckerville Heavy. You can use a couple of layers of Deckerville Light or a plastic foot base for a purse. If you use that, make sure it's well out of the side seams so that you can finish it in because it's sewn in as opposed to added later. Now with our lining, we've got our two body. I have interfaced all mine because it is a light cotton. Base, which is interfaced. Lining pockets, which the zipper pocket linings, which I've interfaced those. The slip pocket I have interfaced half of, which makes it really nice and crisp inside the lining. So I'm using the H tab, the whole tab, because I may add some hardware and add a crossbody. I haven't decided yet. And our zipper overlay and handle connectors. So you need two handle connectors and one zipper overlay. Now the cutting files are all here if you want to cut those with a cutter, and there is a plain one for the model without the rolled handles. So then you'll also need some rope if you're making the rolled handles. This is a 1/2 inch rope, quite flexible, so it's quite comfortable within the handle. You'll need lengths which are 4 inches shorter than your handle length, and of course we need our two handles. I'm not going to run through the hardware because that's clearly outlined in the pattern, but you will also need some binding. Now I use the double fold bias binding that I make myself. The reason I do this is it folds really nicely around the corners and you get a brilliant finish. Now in this pattern it is sewn into the main construction, so you don't need to worry about coming back and adding binding later. So you will also need some double side tape, your hardware as outlined in the pattern, but let's get on and sew her now. So the first thing we would normally do is put applique on the front of the bag, but because I'm going with this lovely print pattern, I'm going to leave it completely blank. I will be doing a video for one that doesn't have the rolled handles, and that's definitely got the applique in it. So we'll start with our handle connectors. So we want to run some double-sided tape down the tab areas of all the connectors. So what we're wanting to do now is fold the edges in from that peak so that it's level all the way along there. And repeat on the other side. So we're going to sew down each side, stopping at 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil past where that fold started. Now I don't backstitch here, I leave long tails and pull them through. See all sewn? I have trimmed my edges. So you probably want to get some double-sided tape now and just put that, now keep it in the middle so that you're going to be sewing around the edge later, so you probably don't want to have it in your seams. Put our D-ring or rectangle tab over the back, and we want this to measure about 1/2 inch from there to the bottom of our D-ring. And we're going to do the same on the other one. Now take a wider piece of tape and we want to go across the middle, keeping it well out of what will be our 3mm seam allowance later on. So then get a front piece, and what we're going to do now is attach these at the top. So I've got this marked, and as you can see, that's 1.5 inches from the edge to that point. And from where we started the very crease to the top, it's 3/4 of an inch. So if you want to double check, you can then measure from what it is to the bottom if you want to double check that they're level. So hold those in place, and we're going to start sewing where we stopped there, come around the whole edge, back up to there and across. Now you can start here and do a double stitch, but I just do one. It keeps it in place quite nicely. Now what I'm going to do now is add a rivet in the middle of these. Now I'm just going to eyeball that. So all the rivets are in place. Now what I'm going to do is add my bag tag. So because we're turning this piece up, we're wanting to, if we're going to put it somewhere else, we're wanting to come up probably at least 4 inches from the bottom. So that's our front complete. So we'll put that aside and look at our back. So for our back, we want to start with our zipper overlay. So we're going to do these tabs exactly the same as the ones we did on the front. Double-sided tape down the side. So again, like our handle connectors, we're going to sew down there, stopping at 3mm past our fold. So stopping 3mm in line with our fold down each end. So put some double-sided tape along the back. Slide our D-ring over the tab. Now again, we want to have 1/2 inch between our fold and where the D-ring will be. Hope that's going to stay put. So once you've measured one, you can kind of line up where the other one should be. And make sure they're coming straight, not to an angle at either side. So clip those in place while you prepare the rest of it. So what we're going to do now is get some double-sided tape. Now, if your machine doesn't like sewing through this, make sure it is well out of your seam allowance. And don't put it too close to the inside because you are going to be trimming fabric around in here later. Right. Now I find it easier to have this on a board so that I can see where everything lines up.
and I line it up so that I've got a middle point. And I'm going to take my bottom tape off. And we want that to be 4 3/8 up from the bottom. Right. So secure that well and then fold it back to take off the other bits of tape. So what are your thoughts on this sublimated fabric? Do you love this print? Let me know in the comments what kind of print you think I should be sublimating next, because I've just started to play with sublimation. I'm loving it so far. Right. These clips are a little bit short to be able to reach in there, but I will give that a go. Start in our holes, come around, right around the edge, back up, across, and then back again. So as you can see, I've put rivets in there to match the front. Now what I'm going to do is cut this fabric away from inside the rectangle. So get your scissors underneath the corners. And lift it up and get right in behind. Just make sure you don't cut the overlay at the front. So that is our zipper overlay. So next we will need our zipper and our 2 zipper linings. Now this always seems really backwards to me, because what we're going to do is sew our zipper tape onto the right side of our fabric. So it always seems a bit strange, because I know normally we do it like that. We're doing it like that this time. So I'm just going to run a little bit of double-sided tape along here. Now you obviously don't need to use the double-sided tape. But I tend to do both sides at once. So I'm also going to run a bit of double-sided tape on this side. So then we're going to open that out and just lie it on top of the other one. So again, it's the wrong side of the zip to the right side of the fabric. And we want to sew along there and along there at our 6mm seam allowance. So there is our seam, our zip. So what we're wanting to do now is put double-sided tape along both sides of that zip. Just like that. Now keep it away from the ends. I've put that too close because you're going to sew down there later on. And we need to put our zipper pull on, don't we? Let's do that now. So I want mine opening to the right, so that's the way it would go in the pocket. So I'm going to take the top off. So what we wanted to do now is centre this Then take off the other side of the tape. Make sure the zip is out flat. So what we're going to do now is stitch around the inside, around there. Now it's up to you whether you backstitch or whether you pull through and cut them as we have been before. Now make sure both of the lining pieces are out flat and not going to come forward. So that's our zip all stitched around the edge. So turn it over and we want to pull down that edge so that it's all nice and flat. So this is where we need to trim this edge up. Now you can put a couple of clips along the bottom. Flip it over, pull this back, and what you're wanting to do is stitch down there and along the bottom and back up the other side, just to secure that pocket. So that is all sewn, pockets all enclosed. Now I haven't quite got enough for my zip, leave it a little bit longer. I've melted those really well, but I would like to have a little bit longer. So that's our back. Now we want to take our front, lie them right sides together, and sew along our bottom seam. So that's all sewn. Now it should be right along the edge of our deckerville. Open that out and butterfly our seam. Now I'm going to do this on the right side so that it's top stitched. Just make sure it stays down flat. Now you can press this if you want to so that it stays nicely open. So what we wanted to do is stitch down each side of those at a 3mm top stitch. Right, so that's all stitched, and as you can see it's on either side. So you want to turn that over and get our piece of extra base support. So what we wanted to do with this is mark our feet on this piece. So we want to find our centre point and draw a line down the middle. We go 3 inches out on either side of that centre point and then go out from there. The measurements are all laid clearly in the pattern. So once we've marked all this up, we want to fuse it or glue it, if it's easier for you, over the seam we've just butterflied on the main body. So that is attached. Now I'm going to cut that, but I'm not going to attach my feet yet. So that's our main body. We'll put that aside and start working on our zip. So next we'll work on our zipper panel. So we want to take our zipper panel. Now I'm going to put some double-sided tape down the edge of this. Now you don't have to, you can baste this or you can just sew it all together. And lay our zip along the edge. Like that. Then take a lining, now this is the flat edge, not the curve. There is quite a bit of a curve in one edge, on one end. And then simply clip that in place. Make sure it lines up in the right place. I thought that was off. So now we're going to sew along there at our regular zip seam allowance. So that's one side done. So now we want to force that open. When I say force, it is quite tough because it's got decouple in it. So I tend to put some clips along the middle. I've just started bringing zips into New Zealand, so this is one off my website, and I love this one. Okay, so then we want to do the same with the other side of our zip. Now make sure this lines up with this side, and that it lines up along the edge, which is a little bit difficult to see with the camera in the way. Turn that over, and again, so we've got the lining to the wrong side. Always put my clips on backwards. Makes it difficult getting them off. And now we're going to sew down there at the same seam allowance. Now what we want to move on to now is either our D-ring tabs or our hold tabs if you're using them. So I'm going to use hold tabs. I'm going to cut that in half, and I'm going to lie it right side together against the edge of my zip. Now if you're wanting to edge coat this, you can do that now, but you want that centered on the edge of your zip. Now if you're doing the D-ring tabs, you want to overhang them as the instructions, I think it's on page 13, tell you. Now what we're wanting to do is baste right around the edge of our zipper panel. So that's our zipper panel all done. So we want to take our exterior gusset pieces and our lining gusset pieces. So we take our D, which is our gusset, and lay that over our zip. Clip these in place. Turn it over. Take your lining, line that up at the same place, and while you're holding it in place, just clip it, allow it to come into the back of your clips. The other end. So you've got wrong sides or right sides of your lining together. Line up the ends, and then just bring it into your clips. So we're going to sew down each end of that at a 10mm seam allowance. So we want to open all that out, back and front, smooth it down. I clip the ends in place just to keep it in place. Right, now you want to top stitch down there and include that back that way. If you are using D-ring tabs, then obviously you would leave them up that way. I've forgotten the zipper pull. Right, so now we're back to where we were before I forgot to put the zipper. With doing the hold tabs, we pull them back that way, so they're just something to hold on when you open the zip. If you are doing D-ring tabs, you will leave it that way. So now we're going to top stitch down there on both sides. So next we're going to work on our slip pocket, which is our G. So we're going to turn that over in half. going to sew down each end, down there and down there. So now we want to turn that through. So I don't clip my corners, I fold them over at a 90. Get my finger in there and turn it through. And that should leave a nice, neat turn. Now if this end isn't perfectly even, like mine isn't, you probably want to trim that up a little bit. Then we want to take our GB piece. Now I'm going to take this, turn this over and put some double-sided tape down the middle. This makes it much easier. Take that off. Now we want to lay this on half of the tape and fold it over the whole way. I have melted the edges of this so it doesn't fray. Right, so now what we're wanting to do is sew down the seam, or top stitch down the seam to the ends. So that's all sewn. Now what you can do is trim the ends, just leave them a little bit longer than the pocket, because you do not want to snip onto the pocket. So now we want an air eraser marker. We want to find the middle point of our pocket. And draw a line down there. Now you can also draw a line around the edges if you wish to be your sew line. And now we want one of our back lining. So mark the centres of that. Line your pocket up so that you can see the line, and it wants to be 1 inch down from the top. And I'm going to put a pin in the middle on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is stitch down here along to the middle, up this side of the line, 2 stitches, and then back down and along up there. Make sure you back stitch very well at the top and bottom. So that's our pocket all sewn. I'm going to put some rivets in along there. So I will mark just on that seam, and in the middle of that one, actually I might have to go in the inside of that. There's probably not enough room on the outside. So that's our pocket all split into 2. Now I usually use 6mm rivets in the top there, but I don't have any in the gunmetal, so that's that all done. So now we want to take our base lining and line that up along the bottom edge. So with this seam we want to start at 10mm, increasing almost straight away to 12 along there and come back to 10. So we're starting at 3/8 of an inch, increasing it to 1/2 an inch and coming back to 3/8. This just stops your lining baggy. So as you can see, it's just come down and then back up. So we want to do that with the other side of our base as well. If you find it easier to draw the line on here or to mark it in some way, then do that. So now we're going to do the same. Start at 3/8, come straight into a 1/2 and then back to 3/8, or 10 mil to 12 and then back to 10. Now what we want to do is to trim them a little bit. So what we want to do is push those away from the base and top stitch down each side with that away from the base. Now the good thing here is to mark all your centers, like put your seams together. Now we did do one side of the top before. And put that to one side. Take our main and do the same. Make sure that that's, mark the centers of that. I normally do this before I even start, which I should have done. Now we want to take our gusset and mark the centers at the bottom in the lining and the exterior. Right, so now we want to take the center of this bit of the gusset and line it up with the center point on our exterior. Then we want to do the same with the other side. Line the center point up with the seam. So the seam is there, and line the center point up with that seam. So now we want to sew from that notch to this notch and get your needle right on that point. Definitely not this way and definitely not that way. So if anything, you better be slightly this way, but on that notch there. So they're all sewn. What we want to do now is clip along that line. Do not clip your seam, but clip along that line on both sides. So I'm going right into that notch, but I'm not clipping my seam. So now we want to fold that seam inwards like that. I can get that out of the way, and we want to top stitch from there in line with that little flap. So from there along on that seam to in line with that bit. Now hopefully you kept your pocket out the way, because I forgot to mention it. Now what we're going to do is place our feet, our purse feet. So it's a matter of finding where our holes are. So I've got one about, oh, I can see that. I'll just open that up so it stays there. can see my feet, which is good. And the last one. If you would like to do a fifth one and put one in the middle, do that. Just don't do it through the middle seam. Okay, that needs a little bit of opening. I'm going to glue a little piece of Decavil Light over the back of these. You can use a tape, but I do prefer something a little bit more solid over purse feet. Okay, so that's our purse feet in place. So now we want to take our lining, right side up, and flip this on top so that you can line up again the gusset over the center point on the lining base. Move it back. Now this is a bit tricky because the base is in the way. And again, line up the center point. Now we want to sew down between the notches like we did last time on both sides. So that is all sewn, and again we want to cut to our notches. Don't cut the seam, and do that on both sides. So now we want our lining to be right side with that. So turn it all carefully inside out. So we want it so that our lining is the right way. So we've got the wrong sides facing together, and we've got a loop like that. So that's right sides together, and that's behind like that. So we want to get the two notches and put a clip in there. And there, so we've got both the notches and the center. So we just want to clip around there because we're going to baste and the same on this side. Our notches and our centers. Now keep in mind that this here, the lining is smaller because of this bit we've taken out of the seam. So it does want to pull apart. Keep it where it needs to go. Keep it lined up. So we want our notch. So what we want to do now is just baste around those two edges, around that side and around that side. So what you have now is your two sides basted together. I tend to sew from this side because it's easier, and just pull that out the way and sew around. So that's all basted together. Now what we want to do, turn it to the back, and we want to add double-sided tape. I use 3mm double-sided tape here, just on the very end. Now I use 3 because you can get it around the corner. Now this is to attach our help attach our binding, because we're going to include the binding into the seam. Now again, we only want to go to that notch, like that. So bring the notch forward. All my seams start to come undone there. and go around the very edge. Now in sewing this, always be aware of your D-rings at the back. Make sure they are down and out of your way. So bring the notch forward and tape around the edge. So then we need to get our double binding. So we want to open out one end. Now we are doing a 10mm seam here, so if you're using thinner binding, you might not want to put it right on the very edge. You might want to bring it in a couple of mils. I'm going to bring mine in. Now do leave an overhang at that edge. So I'm going to come into a couple of mils in, just because my binding isn't as thick as what I need for a 10mm seam. And the reason I use double bias, look how well that just goes around the corner. And that's how it stays all nice and neat when it's done. And leave an overhang. So then we want to repeat that on this side as well. And leave an overhang. Is mark the center of our zipper panel. Now you can do that by lining up those seams and just taking the tiniest little notch like that. So we'll do one side first, and always easier is if you open your zip. I'll do the back first. So we're going to line up our centers like that. Oops, that has dropped out at the back. Keep your D-ring down out the back. Now we will be sewing this with the lining, the binding side down, so put your clips that way. Do a few clips from the center out. Then we need to come to this end. I think it might be a bit hard with camera. A bit close to it, I think. Okay, so bring out, you want to bring the notch out like that, so that all four pieces line up. And the binding is meant to stay in behind. So I'll do that again on this side so you can see what I'm doing. I'm basically, the two little flaps like that, I am folding that in half like that and putting all of those corners together. So see how I've got my exteriors, my lining, and your binding. And then put a couple of clips in there. And then we want to work around our corner. So I find it easier coming to this side at this point, because you can kind of push that in. Now if you need to put a few notches in here to help it get around, do that, but only very tiny ones. So this is a 1 centimetre seam, so you are going to be down in there, so you want to have it a little bit gathered on the corner, or else it's not going to sit properly when you get down to the depth of your seam. So basically your bag at the bottom should be looking like a box and coming to that corner. So that's what you're wanting. Okay, so what we're wanting to do is sew around there, all the way around. Now I sew from that side and get in here with my zipper foot. So if you hold the base like that, you can get right into that corner. But there's one other little thing that I do before I start, and that is put some easy removable tape on the back of this to hold it out the way. So I use some painter's tape. Because you don't want to start unpicking the back because it's pulled down. Right, so we're going to go to the machine, right in at that notch. So hold that back out the way. So if you get in with your zipper foot, come right in over that notch and go all the way around to the other notch here. So I got halfway around and realized I still had my basting length stitch on, so I had to redo that. Okay, so what we want to do is just trim back, tidy up that seam. Don't trim too much off it, just tidy it up a little bit. Make sure your binding is down at the back. So we're taking our seam down to about a 6 mil, quarter of an inch. Take our tape off and lift that binding up over the edge like that. Now I find it easier to finish one side at a time before we go back and do the other. So at this corner, fold that in like that. So you're folding the edge in and then that over, so you get a nice neat peak there. So pull this right up over the edge and clip it in place. It's probably a little bit much at that end, so we'll just trim that back. So fold it over. Right, so now we're just going to go around and sew just inside that seam allowance, all the way around to the. So that is all sewn around the edge. And I also, what I should have got you to do is to check that your corners are all caught and that there's nothing, no holes at your corners, which there's not. I checked them as I was going. So now that we have that done, we shall go and carry on with the other side. But as you can see, all my binding has come off, so I shall do that again. Maybe I'll try a thicker one. It's just hard to get it around the corner when it's thicker. Again, line up our centres, our zipper panel, so our zipper centre and our back. Don't forget we're sewing from this side, so our clips go in that way. I usually clip to the corners. Come to this end. Make sure they are out together like that, and they line up. Now, so if you need to cut a couple of nicks, just do a couple just in there around that corner. Then again, we will tape our binding in place. So you can actually open that out if it's easier to hold it in place. Okay, again, we're going to sew that at a 10mm on this side, so bring that down on an angle so that you can get right into this point with your zipper foot. I'm going to go around there. Now, give it a bit of a trimmer. And not too much, because this seam is actually helping your bag hold its shape as well. And definitely don't go in more than the 1/4 inch. Right, so push that over the ends. As you can see, it's a little bit tight around there, so you can undo that bit. As long as it's doubled in around there, it's fine. So let me know in the comments what you feel is your preferred method of binding, whether you find a waterproof canvas or whether you think this way might be worth a try for you. Right, and again, we're going to sew around just inside our existing seam line. Now that has a couple of purposes. One, it finishes the binding, but it also provides a second seam to take the stress off your original construction seam. So that is our second side all done. So now what we want to do is turn it through. Now just take it really gently, push your corners in. Just one at a time, push it through gently. Push your hand in and get to the corners. And that is our little Georgie. So she does need a bit of a steam or a bit of a press to keep her all nice and shape. So now we shall put that aside and do the handles. So now I'm going to do my rolled handles. So we need our pieces, our rope, pen, ruler and double-sided tape. So first we want to rule a line down the middle. That's enough, clear enough. Then we want to draw a line 2 inches from each end. Now there's many ways of doing rolled straps. I just quite like this version, but you can also do it where it attaches straight to the bag as opposed to through a loop. Now I put this in two pieces because we need to get it off at different times, but you also do need a piece down the middle. I don't usually like to use this thick, but I don't have anything in between. Now I have seen people glue these as well rather than tape it. Now we also need a piece right down one edge. Now not quite to the end, probably about there. This is to hold it all in place when you join it. So we're going to start doing our ends. So we'll start by taking one off each end and folding that into it. Now you want to come up a little bit and put a clip in there. I'm going to go a couple higher up just to hold it all in place. Oops, that's a bit too far. Just so that it meets in the middle. Do that on both. And just see my line through that. Right, so turn those over and grab a silver pen or a pen that you can mark on here with, and draw a 2-inch line across the front. Didn't quite get that side, did I? It might start coming undone. So what we're going to do here is stitch down there, across and back to stop stitch down. Now you can come along there as well if you want to. Right, so if you've used silver pen on your vinyl, I do suggest getting it off fairly quickly. Don't let it dry. Now do be careful. I have heard some horror stories lately about the colour rubbing off vinyl with baby wipes, so do test it on a spare piece of vinyl. Our next thing is to take off the tape inside. So what we want to do is push our rope into one end and then just push it down onto the tape into the middle. Take this piece of tape off. Now I start in the middle here and just line up my ends and clip in there. Now you want these ends to meet like that at the end if you can. Might be a bit tight in that end. It's raining outside, I don't know if you can hear that. It's absolutely pouring. Try and keep those edges so that they actually meet. So what we wanted to do now is sew along here as close as we can get to our vinyl as we can get. So come on there and then go as tight as you can, and then basically come in as tight as you can get at this end. So we're going to sew in here. Now I do use my zipper foot so I can get as close to the edge of the tape as I can. So I start there, go along and flip it over and come back the other way, because you can get in a lot closer at the end than you can the beginning. So I've decided I'm going to edge coat mine. Now what I've done is I've taken the very edges off the end there. Now this is a clear edge coat. I'm not putting a base coat on this, I'm just putting a clear coat just to finish the edge off. So this does dry clear. It just gives it a seal. We'll put that over on. This vinyl's got a really good edge on it anyway, so it just gives it a seal. Makes it look a little bit more professional. Okay, so I'm going to put those aside to dry, and I shall be back to attach them to the bag. So with putting these straps on, what I have done is put a washer in the middle. Now, I don't know if you've used... So with putting these straps on, I've decided I'm just going to use a rivet. Now I've got these little clear plastic washers, and that just gives that a bit more strength. So I put that on there in between, and then I also put one on the other side. Now you can see that once it's pressed, but it actually looks quite good. It just gives it a bit of extra security. Put the rivet through, little plastic washer. The other side, another little plastic washer, and your cap. Now I just bought these at the local hardware store. They were about $1 for a huge big packet, and they are great to fill up space if your rivets are too long, or to use for this type of thing just to give it a little bit more protection against pulling out. So I will press those, and that is our bag. So our straps are all quite secure. So what I'm going to do here, and I'm just waiting for it to arrive, it hasn't arrived, is I am going to use one of these on there and put a chain strap on. But of course I need a gunmetal one, and I thought it would arrive. So that is our Georgie all finished. Isn't she a cutie? She's quite deceptive, and she looks big in photos, but she is really little. I hope you have a great time making this little one. It's so cute.